All right, hello everyone. We are the Openstack project team. I am Eduardo.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Hunter.
Uh, for an overview on what Openstack is, it's an open source cloud platform. It's used by hundreds of companies and thousands of individuals worldwide. It usually consists of scientists, web services, and developers. And one of the true powers of OpenStack is its for open ethos, so open source, open design, open development, and open community. So its needs and opportunities. OpenStack changes and grows all the time. It is incredibly flexible, and it has constant iteration. So many users and many platforms as well. So individuals require many different tools to be able to complete work. Tools and manage and deployment, which technical issues and licensing issues. So a couple solutions that we were trying to figure out with our projects that we were handed to. We were supposed to solve licensing issues, make it easier to make tools, and currently improve existing tools for the OpenStack community.
So our original schedule was, our main goal was to create a clean room implementation of Puppet VCS repo. So Puppet VCS repo is used in a lot of different projects throughout the open source or the OpenStack community. But there's an issue where Puppet VCS repo, it uses the GNU GPL v2 licensing when OpenStack requires Apache v2 for approved releases. So after we were to get that done, we were to work on some improvements for Storyboard, because the main thing was there are so there's a tool that they have to take things from Launchpad and transfer them over to Storyboard, but it was lacking the functionality to transfer blueprints over. So that's our next task after that. And then there's also some API additions to add to RefStack, and another thing to do is to wrap Docker, or wrap RefStack in Docker. So our sprint 1 was mostly used for getting familiar with the tools like Git and Gerrit and using IRC and stuff like that, and to get introduced into the community. Since community is really important in an open source community. So that took quite a bit of time. But then in sprint 2, we began working on actually making this clean room implementation. So the first thing that we had to do was add the project to the OpenStack repositories. However, once we did that, someone brought it to our attention that there already exists a project that does this, that is Apache v2 licensed. So instead of having this drop-in solution that we could do, we shifted gears and changed to just changing over VCS repo to this to Git resource. And so then after that, we started to make the changes and get resource into these places, and then it turns out that someone had already done the work, in short. So that was kind of how our first 3 sprints went.
Live, learn, etc. The largest part of our project so far has been learning and adapting to the environment. Most of our classwork and most of the forms we got for this class assume like a traditional code shop. Boss gives us a big project, we all break down the big project, and then move forward in several sprints until we get to the end. OpenStack so far hasn't worked like this because we've been massaging existing projects to work for new and interesting requirements. So that's one of the biggest things we had to get used to. The other thing, let's see, that's yeah. That's one of the things that comes with getting used to the community. It is, after all, not a traditional code shop. So getting around, getting used to meetings and learning what to adapt, who's working on the project, and et cetera and so forth. That's new and interesting. The other big new thing for us was getting Garrett. Before this project, only one of us had used GitHub in any particular fashion. When I was taking the games course, version control was something you did when 3 people butt their heads together over a shared OneDrive account. So that was new and interesting. So we spent a lot of time getting used to the tools and went through a lot of tutorials, especially figuring out how to which tools work individually for us, whether Linux, the Git Bash, and all of that. So we went through all that. IRC was also it's also surprisingly important. It is part of the community, and you would think that something that was the hot new technology of 1997 would not be relevant today, but it actually is really useful for getting hundreds of people talking to each other and sharing ideas and interacting with the community. We went over this a bit. The biggest part of the of what we did mostly was actually research. Since we could not look at Puppet VCS repo directly to figure out how it was supposed to work, because that would violate the entire idea of not plagiarizing. Yeah, not plagiarizing somebody else's work, clean room stuff. We actually went through the entire project, more or less, to figure out how we were supposed to replace it. I don't know if anybody has downloaded 2000 Gits before, but that is hilarious. So what do we look for? How do we do this? Big part was trying to figure out the keywords, what we would figure out, and how we would prioritize which files in the project just mention it, as opposed to which ones actually use it. And step 2 was replacing the module. So yes, as mentioned, we wound up, after we did the research, the rest of the community, that's the important part, brought it to our attention that somebody else did this. And our advisor would like the rest of us to realize that to know that our work was valued, because it was us that first did the real research to make sure that everybody else knew the size and scope of the problem, aside from just notional advice.
And on top of that, it was just really good experience to be able to go through these projects and figure out how to change them and get things changed, push them up to Git and all that kind of stuff.
So our next steps right now are doing that whole storyboard thing. Since we're getting better at communicating with the community and staking our claim that this is our work and this is what we need to do moving forward, we should be able to do this with better be more productive and all that. And the long-term goals are doing the rest of the high priority project sheet we were assigned at the beginning of the course. So.
So for the issues and risks we had, so one of the pros was that the Openstack community is very active and very helpful. Probably anytime you reach out on IRC, they'll probably be there and anyone will probably answer. Just not sure if everyone has the same knowledge on what we're working on or stuff like that. So sometimes we'd have to wait to get an answer. Like Jason mentioned it is IRC is pretty old, but it works very well in this community. A couple of the cons was that we go to school, we work and stuff like that, and obviously the community doesn't. They're working all around the clock, so that's pretty good. After we clearly stated problems and backed it up with our research, the community went on and patched everything like they mentioned before. So it's very important to claim our project and to make sure that we're the ones working on it, because that's where we went wrong about not doing. So an advisor note was that there was an issue with miscommunication between the advisor and the upstream project members, but after we clear that up and everything, we should probably know better from now on. So for our user story points, these are story points that we had when we were changing the VCS repo instances over to Git. So we started off with the introduction, which was 2 story points. Usually, I feel like the introduction was pretty, what should I say? Underestimated. Yeah. So, and then as well as with tools, we needed to get familiar with tools. I mean, none of us, well, me and Jason never worked with Git or Git review. Hunter did, so he pretty much guided us for a couple days there. So we had to get it in a couple meetings between us, and then we only got to change one Puppet instance. What was it? Ironic that we got to change. So we changed Ironic. We never really got to Tempest because as soon as we were done committing Ironic, we got that message saying that it had already been done by someone else. So this is we probably need to update this a little bit. Yeah, so I mean, right now we're probably on the RefStack server client.
No,
Is that where
we're
at?
working on the storyboard improvements.
Okay.
That's
So-
our next task.
All right, so the storyboard and improvements and testing improvements. So that's where we're at right now. That's what we have for this week. We usually have meetings every week, so we get new directions as we go every week. And so a good reminder would be communication. Communication is key for open source development. Keeping communication between us, the group, and our Openstack advisors. We need to definitely keep in communication. And like we mentioned before, staking claims, making sure we let the community know who's working on what. So that's where we need to be a little more organized so we can definitely work on things a little better. Establishing an identity and relationships in open source community takes time, and best practices aren't always clear. And scheduling, finding times to work together, because we usually meet on Thursdays around 5 with, it's us and the Openstack community, the Openstack advisors, I mean. So, and then after that, we have to find time for us to meet, which is pretty difficult at times, but we get it done, so that is all.
Any questions?
Any questions?
There was a slide earlier on that had comment from your mentor sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You kind of didn't talk much about that. I think was really important, where he said the work was good, he was kind of faulting himself for having not.
Oh, I think it was.
Yeah, I guess in
Yeah,
short,
that one.
yeah. So there was just kind of a miscommunication between emails where it kind of seemed like he was asking for someone to do it, but in reality he was telling them that we were gonna do it. So someone just kind of did it because it didn't really seem like too much of a deal. So, you know,
That's
but
the big lesson we learned.
But the thing is that the patch that we put up was nearly identical to what they had done anyway. So, you know, at least we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you did ask for help in IRC chapter or something. So is there like specific what do you call it, your mentors or your advisors who help you, or are there like other people from the community who jump in and advise you on?
So there's specific groups that you can join, and each group has a specific name. And our advisor gave us certain group names that we can join, and those people are able to help us out with the certain subject we're on. So that's how that works out. There's a bunch of groups on there, probably hundreds on there. So
Most of the questions we wind up asking is, we're working on this, how many people does this affect? Is there anything that we need to know to make sure that X, Y, and Z applies to, you know, what we're attempting to do next, and like what is the outline of the stuff we need to address.
So is there like a way of tracking like who's working on what, like instead of just having like email each other, or because this time it was lost in communication, how like you ended up doing duplicate work, like is there a better process moving forward, or?
The better process moving forward is there are mailing lists for everybody in like every little section of Openstack, and you know, emailing everybody and say, hey, we're doing this in particular, instead of, you know, just leaving it up in the air. That's our big lesson. Yes.
I guess you had kind of mentioned the second thing you were working on involved this process of we need to figure out who's using this, and that involved, well, how do we look through all of these projects to figure that out? Do you think that's a problem that a lot of people potentially have to solve? So if you had developed some code or some utility, a process to go about solving that problem, it would actually be useful to kind of put that code out there so that anyone else with a similar issue wouldn't have to kind of reinvent the wheel or figure it out from scratch like you guys did?
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. What we ended up doing actually is, you know, we just downloaded every single project that they own.
That was fun.
And extracted it, and then we just used grep to search for Puppet VCS repo. And then we just kind of looked for the lines that were like, you know, dependencies. And then once you figure out what the dependencies look like, you can just kind of pick them out pretty easily.
There was a lot of time trying to figure out, is this the most efficient way we can do this? Is this?
I don't
Is
know if
this?
it's a good solution, but maybe it kind of is, so.
yeah, but then it was pretty narrowed down to 3 Puppet instances, which is Puppet Ironic, Tempest, and we never figured out the third one. I think there was another one, right?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a quick Control F would help us out a lot.
I think it was in Puppet Stack Info, one of those.
No, it was with, no, I forgot what it was.
Are the storyboard improvements a one sprint task?
I think they are. I can't. So we have one task that we plan on doing, which is the blueprints transfer, which we plan on getting done in just one single sprint. So I'm not sure if there's any other improvements that we're going to be making on top of that, but yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.